I would like to introduce and call upon our panel members to come on stage. Starting with Mr. Akib Hussain. Mr. Hussain is a founding partner at Free Flow Ventures. He is the National Academic Partner of Startup India Yatra. He is Evangelist and Designated Partner of Thematic Funding and Cloud Syndicates, National Venture Building Partner of Invest India, Research Scholar of Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. He has impacted 287 startups via venture building, 74 startups directly through investment. He possesses co-founding experience of 5 successfully operational startups, more than 8 years of business and technology development experience and industry exposures. Having worked with industry leaders like Google and IBM, as well as having had the launch experience for more than 46 startups, he represents an array of experiences stretching across the professional ecosystem of the Southeast Asian region. We welcome you, sir.
Next, I will request Dr. Debaprosanna Nandy to come on stage. Dr. Nandy has obtained PhD in Economics as UGC Fellow from the University of North Bengal. He is a fellow member of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India and Institution of Valuers India. He is also a member of the Operational Research Society, UK and India Public Health Association. He is presently working as Senior Director at the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, and he is also the Chief Executive Officer of ICMAI Registered Valuers Organization. He has also served the Institute as Director, Journal and Publications, and Director, Examinations. We welcome you, sir.
Next, we have Ms. Monika Mohta. Ms. Mohta has been a chartered accountant, rank holder. She is also a company secretary and LLB. She has more than 20 years of experience in corporate finance and has held various leadership positions in leading companies like Visa Steel Limited, Tega Industries Limited, Setia London, Hindustan National Glass Limited. She brings with her loads experience in the fields of accountancy, project and working capital financing, commercial and legal contracting, secretarial and compliances. Presently, she holds a board position in Visa Coke Limited for the past 5 years. We welcome you, ma'am.
Now I will welcome Mr. Prakash Kamath. Mr. Kamath has over 33 years of experience in multiple organizations ranging from manufacturing, consulting, BPO, KPO, and banking. His experience encompasses finance and accounting, human resources, technology, and he is a subject matter expert on accounting systems, labor laws, regulatory compliances, and management of retirement trusts. He has worked with multiple Indian and global clients, some of which are Reliance, GE, Sprint Telecom, JP Morgan, British Council, and traveled extensively in the course of his work to Europe, US, Africa, Australia, and Far East, as well as all over India. He is currently the Human Resource Chief Operating Officer with Deutsche Bank in India and is Management Accountant by profession. Welcome, sir.
Next, we have Mr. Samir Agarwal. Mr. Agarwal, before promoting IndCap advisors, he has worked with global consultancy firms like Arthur Andersen and Ernst & Young, wherein he advised multinational clients like Colgate-Palmolive Incorporation, Cummins Incorporation, JP Morgan Chase & Company, American Express Bank, McKinsey Incorporation, etc. He has handled various assignments successfully in the sphere of mergers and acquisitions, fund mobilization, financial structuring, and equity placements. He is also an active member of the Executive Subcommittee of Confederation of Indian Industry, Eastern Region. We welcome you, sir.
I would like to welcome Mr. Vineet Patawari. Mr. Patawari is the co-founder and CEO of Stockage India's most highly rated stock market self-research tool for research for retail investors with 4 million plus users across the nation. He is also the co-founder of India's biggest dedicated financial marketing training platform, elearnmarket.com, which has 300 plus market experts training various aspects of financial markets. The motto of his venture is to empower individual investors so that they can make better financial decisions. Mr. Patawari has been awarded BW Education 40 Under 40 Club of Achievers 2020. Business Site's Most Iconic Leaders to Watch in 2021, and Indian Achievers Award 2022 for CEO of the Year.
And we have with us Mr. Sumit Arora as the moderator for both the sessions. Mr. Arora is an educator, learning strategist, and a co-founder at Novo Leaders, which enables holistic family learning. We welcome you, sir.
And now, I would like to call upon stage Mr. Goel to present a memento to all the panelists. Mr. Akib Hussain. Dr. Debaprosanna Nandy. Ms. Monika Mohta. Mr. Prakash Kamath. Mr. Samir Agarwal. Mr. Vineet Patawari. And Mr. Sumeet Arora. Thank you so much, sir. And now I'll hand over the session to Mr. Sumeet Arora. Thank you.
Normally you begin with checking the mic by saying check, right? I get inclined when I talk to finance guys, I say check, draft, cash, kuch bhi chalega. Thank you everyone for making it on time. Thank you everyone for being here. No, this is not a vote of thanks, but it starts with gratitude for the HR guys to begin with, and starts with money for everyone. So, I believe 1994 I started my first organization long back, and then 1998 another one, 1999 one more. Those days they did not call it startups, but it was like starting businesses. So I just wanted to understand what your views are about starting a business and the startup world, if there is some difference. And we have quite a few startup related people here. So let me point it out from there. Is that really different? Or?
So should I take a lead?
Yes, yes.
So when you started your first company, I was not even born. So I was starting up then. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Startups. Okay. Startups are like life. Startups are a cradle of innovation, a cradle of crazy hustle, or a cradle of understanding a lot of jargon, yet not caring for any. And it is kind of the ability for them to say, okay, I might not have the greatest of resources at my disposal, but what I do have is the ability to take a chance with a problem. So I've often asked it to a lot of these kids in campuses, what is the first emotion, vision, word that comes to your head when I throw the word startup? And they come up with all crazy kinds of words. Some of them come up with Elon Musk. Some of them come up with Jugaad and a lot of the other stuff. The one greatest answer that I got from one of these campuses was people.
People.
People. it is the eye for people's problem that these people have, for which they build a team of people who are gracious enough and courageous enough to go to enough number of people by the time it turns into people-driven profitability. So that's what startups are to me.
I love that. People, problem, profitability, and people to solve the problem. A lot of peace coming away in the startup.
The new piece.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to add to?
So just to add to what Akib said, I had the opportunity of interacting with few students in one of the events, and I just impromptu, as you asked what a startup is, and I did the same thing. And the one word which echoed a lot was entrepreneur. So I said, no, why? Startup has not many employees, but he says everyone gets ESOP, so we all are equal owners. So that's another, just to add a point that once you talk about startup, everyone feels that it's my company. So it's an entrepreneurial mindset which comes into mind when you talk about startup.
It's like ownership.
Yes.
So I'll just add a point to that. I agree to what they said. People are very important, and they are the owner of the company. But just to technically differentiate, I also have been asked this question, like maybe they have asked me somewhere where I was in college, but just I'm saying, technically, how one can differentiate between the two is a business and a startup. The technical difference can be speed and technology. So basically a startup is meant to become scaled up, and that too very, very fast and with the use of technology. So where in the genesis of an organization, speed and technology are ingrained into it, that's a startup. And rest, obviously we all do business, so startup is a subset of business, it's not something different. Yeah.
So I'm probably the last person to be speaking of startups. I'm the most risk-averse person on this panel, and I work for 3 organizations, and all of them have lasted 100 years. Okay,
I
each
saw
of them
your
is
profile
100
as well. Your years of experience in those organizations has been vast as well. Not
so
3 years and 4
I
years.
say a startup, and this thing is like watching, in the old days, I use a cricketing analogy. When you start, you find Sehwag and Tendulkar coming out to bat. So once startups start batting like Sehwag,
The risk is high.
business bats like Tendulkar. You need both. You need a very different type, like he said, craziness. I think craziness is very important. You've got to have a crazy idea, and you have to have enormous faith and drive into it. If you don't have that, you really don't. I see a lot of people in my organization, they leave and they say, I'm joining a startup.
Startup.
At a very, maybe higher salary, and within 6 months they are devastated because they can't handle the pressure, they can't handle the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're sitting on a dining table and working.
Yeah, the craziness there.
And you have gone from an organization where you have a large desk with 2
Corner office.
computer panels and phones and everything, and suddenly you go to this place in Pune. So the mindset, people are very, very important. Unless you have that mindset, you can't do it.
True.
Yeah.
It's like when you, it's like when you decide to do everything. That is when you are ready for a startup. That's what I
From
feel.
the chaprasi to the chairman.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
when
we
you
call a C2C.
have a mindset of going and doing everything in any particular situation, then you're ready for a startup.
Great. How do you differentiate in academia between people who are come to learn to become a startup, a family business, or something on those lines as maybe a corporate employee?
Right.
Is there
Actually,
something different?
to me, startup may have some another connotation. Okay. What you are saying, that is from realistic perspective. Say, for example, a ongoing business, so it is not doing good, okay, or it is not doing good as per its expectations. So if someone gear up the business, gear up the productions and everything, so that is also one kind of startup to me, okay. So
That's interesting.
It's a 50 years old age-old business, but someone has geared up the business to another level. So that is another kind of startup.
So-
To me, it is also a startup.
So taking the cue from here for big businesses and startups, is there some commonality or difference between setting up a new business or a territory or a new market in a big business versus how a startup works? Or does setting up a new geography or a new market works like a startup?
So I think, generally once you say it's a startup, everyone thinks it's a new idea. Setting up a new business, I can just replicate something manufacturing with some better efficiencies and do. But once you say you have a startup, whether you have actual money to invest or not, but you would really want to know what the idea is. Because people will think that if it's a startup, it must be an innovative idea. So that's, I believe, is a fundamental difference between, starting a new business vis-a-vis you call a startup.
When we look at a startup, the transition from one phase to another phase is expected to happen very, very fast. So when we start a business, let's say we started a kirana shop. For years and years we see that there is a single kirana shop. There are very big brands in Calcutta which are sweet shops. Everyone knows them, but they still have one shop only. Because they don't want to transition from one stage of business to another stage of business, right? So they have 10 employees who are probably 20 years old. They are running a successful business, no doubt about it, but they are not transiting from one to another stage. In a startup, it is supposed to transition from one stage to another stage. Though in our mind, we have pictures of a startup where people are working from dining table, sitting around dining table, but that's a phase which has to finish very, very fast. Otherwise, if you are stuck at that phase for years, then you are just struggling and you will go nowhere, right? So from a family stage, which is like 6-7 people, you have to go to a clan stage where you have 100 people, to probably you have to go to a tribe stage where you have 500 people, to probably a village which has 1,000 or 2,000, and then probably from there to a city stage. Still you are a startup because you are transiting from one stage. So, we say Flipkart is still a startup, probably it will have 10,000 employees. So that's my take on that.
My take in this is like, in a startup, the planning, the project stage is very short. You don't plan much, but when in an existing business, when you are growing, when you're going to the next stage, you do a project report, you do the financing, you talk to the investors, there are many things to it. But when in a startup, when you're transiting to another stage, it is very quick and without any groundwork.
True.
So that's how you transit in a startup.
Akib, startups may be having some extremes as well, from one end to other
all
end.
the time. Just to pick up the last point that Vineet ended on, there's this huge amount of virality that startups have. And it's kind of become very contagious to even the ones who were just surviving with those one stores. They are also wanting to kind of piggyback on this idea of what do we do next to define our next generation growth. And that is where the extremes come from. They do not limit themselves to the idea of what they started with. The pivots are faster, as Monika ma'am said. There are so many of these X number of iterations that they do much quicker than a traditional business. And the element of chance and the element of fail to them is not that big a deal. It is calculated. It's not as much a gamble as it's put out there as. They know their numbers. These are generally good on numbers people. But they know when to pivot and then they know when to fail fast. Which is something that as traditional industry and business owners, we kind of take a back seat on. So that's broadly where the extremes come. How fast can you actually go ahead and pivot? And you were something else 6 months ago, and then for the survival and the scale, you just pivoted to a new avatar altogether. So that's the startup zeal.
Taking Kamath sir's point of cricket, is startup kind of a T20 match and business a test match, and can really a T20 transition to a test match if you really look at it? Maybe you would also like to take up that.
What you said is absolutely correct. It has to transition. If you have to be because you can't live in a T20 arena all the time. Some people might make some money, but finally if you have to be a great cricketer, you have to transition to the longer, and it has to reach a level of stability.
True.
You can't live in a state of continuous
So,
excitement. Whether it's a Facebook or a WhatsApp, at some point they are business as usual. What we call
Akib seems
BAU.
to differ on that point. Yeah, Akib?
Not exactly,
You,
but it's,
you gave me that expression.
yeah,
कि यार ये
it's,
कुछ
it's a
ज़्यादा हो
trade-off. There would be a cricketer who is a great in T20, and he'll continue playing T20 across the globe in various franchises. He might never aspire to be a Test cricketer at all. So I think the benchmarks are also pretty different now that startups have become as mainstream as they have become. Your greatness is nowhere close to the format in which you play today. It's also defined by your excellence that you pursue in that particular form itself. The extremes of pressure in a T20 might never be matched in a Test cricket scenario. So that's the analogy, if I can put it. There are trade-offs. There are people who are running on adrenaline rushes as part of a company for 12 years in consecution. And Zerodha is a great example of that. They've continued that very mindset for 12, 13 years consistently. Do we still call them test match players? Not at all. They're still discovering the new pivot. They're still discovering the new reference. So there is this. There's a definitive.
If I may ask, what is the objective of a startup?
What is the end game of a
What is
startup?
the end game?
To remain a startup lifelong, maybe?
I mean, you
if
mentioned
that is
Flipkart making 7,000 crore loss. What is the end game of Flipkart? I don't know.
Ideally, stay a startup. If I had the chance of actually building a startup, which would be taken in the same breath as the names that we are taking right now, the mindset never changes. If we can afford to stay a startup through the life cycle of a particular business, a Deutsche Bank would give one of its limbs to remain that way. So that's essentially.
What I meant was that at some point, do you want to become profitable, give a product to the clients, etc.?
It's a function of time now. The fact that even younger startups who are just 6 months old or a year old, and I work with a handful of them nowadays globally, and the idea is they're chasing profitability from the 3rd month. They're not waiting.
That is an objective.
It is an objective. Giving returns to your stakeholders is an objective. Giving returns to your own employee base is an objective. Giving returns to the impact of who you are creating the product and the platform is an objective. But that does not take them away from the pivot and scale mentality either, which is where I think Sumeet would go next, which would be asking valuation versus value creation, and we'll discuss that.
Just on that point, a small point on that. What happens is, startup is very focused around an individual, an entrepreneur, or a team of co-founders. So what happens is, let's say if I have a skill set which is more suited towards, lot of buzz around me. So I want to stay at a particular, my mindset will suit a particular kind of organization. I might not be suitable for a very stable organization which takes a lot of time in planning things, etc., because that doesn't suit me as an individual. So what happens is the individual might go out, someone might take it over, right? So there are all kind of changes happening. Today we had a full page ad on Big Basket, and now if you see the ad, right, you understand that the Tata thing is there at the back of the mind when they are giving that ad, that it gives you a choice that you can take it slow also, like you order it in 24 hours or you order it in 15 minutes. So that crazy rush of 15 minutes delivery is probably, that's not what they are playing on, because someone else's mindset is working, not the original founder's mindset. And that's happening with many startups. And these people who go out from these startups, get a successful exit, they start another organization which suits their temperament. So this cycle goes on, I think.
So very interesting, very small story. I'm allured with this discussion. So it's long back, maybe 100 years back at Shantiniketan, Rabindranath Tagore's Shantiniketan. One of the famous artists was there, Ram Kinkar Bej, used to involve in various sculpture. But what Tagore seen that he has done many things, but he has not completed anything. So he advised him, you should do one thing and you complete it. In Bengali he said, আমরা অনেক কিছু শুরু করতে পারি কিন্তু শেষ করি না. So what regarding Sachin Tendulkar, he started and he finished his career. Virendra Sehwag, same thing. Okay, Virat Kohli, same thing. That means a startup there should be some end or a respectable end.
True.
So this is a small instance.
No, of course, sometimes the end game is also to sell to a bigger and exit.
Yeah.
Because
And
there
start
are people
another
who
startup.
say my only job is to keep doing startups.
Yeah.
I do a startup, bring it up to certain size and sell to a big player, right? Which is what a lot of companies have done. I remember the very first great startup story in the 90s, I think, was Hotmail. Samir Bhatia set up Hotmail and sold it to Bill Gates for some 500 million or whatever it is. And that was considered the greatest, startup deal. The fact that he negotiated with Bill Gates with nothing but an email platform, which we now take for granted. I have always felt that had Hotmail continued, he would have continued making losses. There was no profitability model with Hotmail. And Bill Gates bought it primarily for that base of consumer base or whatever you may call it. That's what he bought it for. And he got it. I mean, there's nothing wrong in it.
We will take this to the next step of money now. We're talking about having CFOs on the panel as well and in guests. How do you guys look differently to startups and big organizations like maybe the banks, the companies which are there for years, decades, centuries? What kind of parameters do you really look at? One he very clearly said was pitch, scale and pivot and scale. How do you really look at money that way?
Okay, when we talk about money in an organization, from the zero date minus 2 years, you already know what kind of money you need. And then you start working towards it. And when you talk about a startup, zero date plus 1 month also you don't know what kind of money you need. You just go on doing it. And you just go on, you play as it comes. So, CFO's role in a startup, I'll say that the founder is doing whatever the CFO can do. And in a company, the CFO's role is very, very defined. They know what to bring in, how to market it, how to manage it. So there's a very, very huge difference between a money management in a startup setup and a money management and a money creation, finance, bringing finance and maintaining it in a set organization.
So startup CFO is always behind money, how to get more and more money from investors.
So when you do any startup as a founder, you may not be a good finance guy, but a good business guy. So they will always look out for someone who can assist them in their business plan. And any business startup, fortunately, unfortunately, when you go and meet investor, their first question is how much is your burn rate? So they expect you that, as a startup, you are burning money. And you are here to raise money to fulfill that gap which is there. So it's important for any startup to, figure out, let's say if I have a 3 months, 6 months, 1 year horizon of, my product getting launched in a big manner, I should know that what is my burning per month, how much cash I'm losing. And that's where you demand that kind of money from investors. So 3 months, 6 months, probably the founder will, through his friends and relatives, will do some initial rounds. But at some point of time, when it becomes too much of a problem, is not able to do capital raise, that's where you get stuck. So the CFO role in a startup is evolving every day. You have to keep on chasing money. Banks, my serious doubts, because it's a very risky proposition. It's a high risk, high reward game, which generally banks do not entertain. And that's where your venture debt, your venture capital, all these people come into play. And they play a very important role in the growth stage of any startup.
So businesses also start, big businesses also start new divisions. They're also money burnout is there, and then till the new product establishes, the company is sponsoring money. How different is it from getting money from outside people than in an organization where you do it? That comparison, if you guys could bring in some thoughts.
I think the best example of this is ITC going from tobacco to atta, right? Today, their atta is one of the best, market leaders.
Market leaders.
But the cash is coming from the tobacco. And their tobacco money is like, it's just flowing in. No matter how much you tax it, people still smoke. And there is huge amount of cash coming in. And it's cash. It's not even, they don't sell cigarettes on credit. It's cash. So most companies, Reliance did that with Jio. They got money coming in from another business line. So I think it's like a safety net to a great extent. Because you may say that you are on your own, you got to run, but there is always, some cash with you. In a startup, you don't. You are, you may have venture people with you, but I think the risk is that much higher.
Akib, back to you. With Vineet, what do you think? Would you like a company to sponsor you guys as a startup, or is it okay to get money from VCs and outside?
I'd love to believe that the company has a lot of stake in sponsoring me before I wanting to go to them and getting sponsored. 16 of our startups did that. So companies came to them and essentially said, I love what you're building. Would you like a dole of capital from us? That's an ideal situation to be in because the startups get a little amount of leverage there. But just to take on the points that were being discussed, money for a startup today has different meanings at different times. So, which is true for traditional businesses also, but again, the durational understanding of this is a little different with regard to startups. At the onset, it's about optimization, it's about being frugal, it's about being creative with how you use it and how you co-create capital with it, which is what is bought by the eventual external provider. Ki boss, they're extremely frugal in how they do their stuff and they're still being able to scale it, which is what they love, and then they give capital to become exorbitant, which is again traded off. So what we have seen recently is the ones who are being able to scale at a very rapid strike rate, if I can put it, because we are discussing cricket time and again. The strike rate has gotten better because they have maintained the ability to optimize cash. They have maintained the ability to acquire customers consistently at a certain price point, irrespective of whether there was external cash available or not. And then the pandemic and everything else around it has kind of made them a little more resilient than how we used to see our own ecosystem about 5 years ago. So there has been a paradigm shift in that. The founders come with a lot of safety nets themselves. And again, with regards to the ITC example, there's a counter example to that, which is the Nokia example. Too much of forecast and too much of brainstorm made them miss the smartphone, the smartphone bus. And there was a startup which was smart enough to sell something to Apple to make that faster. So it's about knowing the right time for the right thing and the right money for it. So it will have different meanings at different point of time.
True. Sustainability versus growth. Another big fight which always every CFO looks at. बोले business चले तो सही, growth बाद में करेंगे. Yeah? और survival. और growth के बिना survival नहीं है. What would you want to bring to?
Earlier we were only discussing about growth, how to create. But right now the key word is sustain and maintain. Whatever finance, whatever resources we have, maintaining them, giving good corporate governance, land sustaining, and projecting. That has become very, very important in today's world. And that is the paradigm shift which has happened over the years. Earlier we were just financing was just creation, just getting the funds. And right now it's not the case. Right now, maintaining that fund and giving the right value to the investors, giving the right value to the banks back, that has been very, very important right now.
True. So sustainable growth, and how do you really look at forecasting and maybe looking at projections?
Yes. I think the CFO's role is dual in nature. I mean, depending on, he's sometimes the clutch, he's sometimes the brake, right? They say that when the car is going downhill, you need somebody on the brake because it's going downhill. So you got to hold it. But when you are accelerating also, you need somebody on the clutch. So you you can regulate the speed of growth, because speed of growth also means risk. So, and at some point of time, we have sort of, the CFO also has to think, and this has been told to me by one of my very big, when I was in the Tatas, the head of Tata, he said, remember that you are a custodian of people's money. So you are not here to further your career or do something brilliant. You are a custodian. First and foremost, you are a custodian of shareholder money, company money, and you are responsible for paying salaries to employees. You have employees. So you should not take the level of risks which puts all these people at risk. So you have to keep that in mind, so, which is very...
so this brings us to the next thought, safety versus risk. How much risk and what?
So, so one of the point which I missed when you asked what do you think when a word startup is said? I think one of the very key aspect is fearless. When we speak to investors and we try to find out, how do you look at founders of a startup? The first word they say, he should be fearless. There should be no fear. I mean, they should try as hard as possible. Let them fail. If they fail, that's the biggest experience they get. So I think that's where your risk averse vis-a-vis extreme risk, which from a founder of a startup is expected. I think Akib can add more onto this, but this is one of the key traits between a company which is not so-called a startup, but a startup, and you expect a startup founder to be as fearless and aggressive, so that I think Vikash made one point of GMV, gross merchandise value, and that's what the intent is. Boss, burn karte jao, lekin sales badhao, and that's how the valuation is driven.
So traits, if we just take this further from, like you said, startup is an attitude. So it could also be part of what traits people should have to work in a startup and versus what traits they should have to work in a organization which is already settled. As academics, I'll also throw this question to the audience as well, but let's begin from here. What would be your role practically to really be able to differentiate between who wants to go where, look at some psychometric test, maybe, I don't know, on something of those lines, and say, boss, tu startup mein mat ja, or you go to a...
I have one funny take on this, so I'll add on to what's...
Yeah, so this is very interesting. I have a case study with me. I'm from a Bengali family. I'm not a business family. My total career in around 30 years career, mostly in academics, sometimes in industry also, consulting also, but it's never been any startup or entrepreneurship. But I when joined this institute, it has a great potential, government organization, it's a ministry affiliated organization, but I thought that somewhere it is missing. So I started innovating things. And you can't believe within this last 3 to 4 years, our student strength has been increased by 3 times. Our placement has been increased by 10 times. Okay, so is it not a startup? So now I can think after retirement, I can start an academic institution. So this is, the trait was not within me, but it is developed, it is inculcated. With my
True.
Work. It's a case study.
Yeah. You would like to bring in your story before...
No, so I just added fearless. Another thing was, it was a very funny incident. I was a banker to a startup advisor, and I went in my coats and everything. And suddenly, the startup founder came in his torn jeans and casual t-shirt.
Yeah.
And I said, boss, investors se milne ja rahe hain, thoda properly dress. Well, investors are going to love this. And actually happened. So that's when I realized that if you are a startup founder, an investor expect you to be wearing this and not suit boot mein aane, because they expect to be grounded people working day and night, and you don't focus on your clothing. So funny things happen, but that's one of the trait that don't focus on your clothing as such, but focus on your work.
Yeah, the most underdressed person on the panel is here.
No
blazer, no
let me
coat.
give you a little take on this. You should actually focus on the clothes, but wear the right clothes for the right environment. So I've been a consultant, right, with the Big Four, and we used to go to a factory, or we would go to a corporate head, corner office. Now, depending on whether you're going where and you're talking to whom, so I would always have this blazer in the car, So when I go to a factory, take the blazer, leave it in the car, roll up my sleeves. Right?
Very important, yeah.
Then you are one of the factory people you have. But when you go into the corner office, you...
Sure. So, you know, what's happening is, I think a lot of stereotyping is happening for entrepreneurs. I don't think they are different animals altogether. They are all the same, right? And they are made up of, I run a startup, we have 240 people in that organization, which we have built over a period of time. What I understand is, you do all the mistakes. You don't know anything extra. You're not smarter than anyone else. It's all the same, right? So we have to first of all stop, you know, keeping them at a different pedestal altogether, right? Everyone is scared. Everyone is scared. If you don't have money to pay to your employees, right? If you have any shame, you will be ashamed to face them that I did something, I screwed up, and that's why you are not getting paid, right? Whatever stories we make, if you have vendors waiting for payments, and if you don't make that payment, either you are a startup or a big organization, you should be ashamed that, you know, you have done something wrong, you went somewhere wrong, your learning was insufficient somewhere, that's why you are making these mistakes, right? This failure, mistakes, if they are idealized too much, there is a risk that a lot of startups will fail, because, you know, we are saying failure is what you should have. And see, if we are a very developed country, right, if you are out of employment, you have ways to manage yourself. The government is also there to take care of you. But in this place where we are, if you are out of a startup, 3 years you failed, you have no money, right, your life is very miserable. Let me tell you that. The reason for that is, let's say you went to IIM or IIT, etc. Fresh out of college, you get a package of, let's say, 50 lakhs per annum. You do a startup, 2 years, you fail, you go again in the corporate world, you don't get even half of that. And this is practical, right? You may say that I might still have that vigor, that fearlessness that I'll start again. But now your life cycle, your life stage has changed. Probably you have got married, you have kids. So what I'm saying is, see, learning at every stage is extremely, extremely crucial. See, what I liked about the IIM curriculum was, it was very, very case study driven. So you learn from the practical experiences of what the best ones have done in the past, right? Just taking the example of Tatas. I went to Jamshedpur couple of months back, and what I realized is everyone over there I met respect Tatas like they are the government over there, right? Because they take care of the entire city. So this CSR, this sustainability, the whole thing is embedded in their business. It's not something they are doing separately. That's so much ingrained in their culture. So point is, when you grow from one stage to the other, your learnings, you have to unlearn a lot of things. The things which used to work earlier might not work at a different stage. And the problem happens is the organization outgrows you as a founder also a lot of times, if you don't keep upgrading yourself. So the idea is, sustainability will only come if you yourself as a leader, you know, since it's a leadership summit, whatever, leader is a very pompous term, but as a person who's running the organization, if you don't unlearn and learn new things continuously, the organization will not sustain because you're not doing the right things.
Sure. One comment, Akif, from you, then I'll move to the audience as well, and I'll ask someone to take the mic to Girish Khaitanji, Sunil Agarwalji will hear their views as well. And
Thank you, Vineet, for bringing out the humane aspect of it. We are not just people with torn jeans and a lot of fearless attitude. We actually are very fearful on the 31st of a month. It has to have that human element to it. The romanticism that's around the idea of being an entrepreneur is very adrift from the actuality of how he kind of creates that particular company. And what you see on a Shark Tank on an evening is 7 years in the making or 5 years in the making. So let's set the right examples. And for once, and just a quick deference from what was the last year, we will have to start celebrating a bit of failures also. We don't celebrate that enough. We're just celebrating the 108 unicorns. We don't celebrate the 10,000 that did not make it there. And there is much more to learn in that particular trajectory than compared to the 108. The unlearning and the learning that we are emphasizing towards happens with those 10,000 a way bit more than compared to what your 108 can give you. So let's be failure as a service as many times as possible, because that allows us to be different, notional, and yet humane. So
yeah, maybe the 10,000s could bring in more case studies to the academia.
Absolutely.
And
more
teach them
contemporary
what not
case
to do
studies.
or what to do. We have in our guests Mr. Girish Khaitanji. If you would like to add something about...
I have nothing to add actually.
or comment.
Such wise comments have come, I don't have anything to add.
Sunil ji, Newtown School, if you would like to put...
Rather have something to ask.
Please, go ahead.
Some insight on POC. Proof of concept.
Proof of concept.
So what happens is, these are very fancy terms, but in short, what you are trying to do it small first, launch it, see whether people are taking it or not. See, measurement is very important. What happens is, as a startup, when we do things, we are in too much of hustle to do a lot of things, but we don't measure the impact of it. At the onset, when we don't even plan, what will be the success metrics of that. So the idea is a POC brings in what will be the success metrics, you measure it against that, and if it is working the way you want, you go ahead and you launch a full-fledged product, or you pivot and you create something else, because this entire development of a product is a very, very tedious, painful, expensive exercise. So rather than building the whole thing and giving it to public to see whether they are taking it or not, you do it small. That's basically proof of concept, and you must do it. For everything which is possible, prototypes must be built, and you should have teams which should build the entire schema on paper, on Figma, which we call, right, before actually building even start to build the product. Yeah.
Just to add on to what Vineet has said, what our experience has been on POC side has been just don't drag it too much. There are vultures around. They are waiting for good ideas, good products, and the moment you just keep on keeping it as POC, someone would just be making it a more viable product, getting their thoughts, and by the time you think that, now I'm ready to take off, those people have already taken it off. So POC period should also be, should not be very long enough so that someone else takes on from that idea.
True. I have a small thing for engagement with our guest as well. If you could display on the screen, the laptop, please. If you could use your mobiles. Normally they say mobiles nahi use karna hai, but I'll invite you to use your mobiles. We'd love to see what organization type the audience is here. You could go to menti.com and type in the code which is there on the screen. You can see 55681701. क्या हो रहा है भाई? Proof of concept. We're trying to get, yeah. You could type menti.com and there would be a question there, and let's see what kind of people we have here. Okay, we have a few answers that have started coming up. You'll get a couple of questions. Let's do some survey. Let's check what kind of things we see here. Okay. I hope, yes, it does. We have a couple of responses. We have proprietorship people, partnership, private limited, 1 or 2 public limited. Others is always there as an option nowadays. You really do not know how many people from others. Maybe students. Yes. Yes. Okay, so we have a lot of public limited, proprietorship, private limited, almost. Private limited is more as compared to others. Okay, let me take this further. One more question, just to understand the demographics of our guests. Let's look at their work experience or professional experience, even as business or working in an organization. Wow. Yes. For the HR, it's the bell curve, right? One more on demographics, and then we'll have some questions related to business, and then we'll have our views about what audience thinks. मतलब जनता क्या कहती है और हम क्या कहते हैं उस हिसाब से we could definitely, our nation wants to know, we can look at that as well. Wow, here also we have startups, entrepreneurs, consultants, finance guys, human resources, students, educationists. Yeah, finance is a big blue. Yeah, we expect that with VG inviting people, mostly of his type. And now for the question which we're waiting for. 3 challenges in starting a new business. Whatever comes to your mind, put in, and then we will also pass it on to our people. What do they really think about it? We'll create a maze word, whatever word, single word, 2 words you want to put up as challenges, put it up, and then let's see what the panel also has to talk about it. People, funding, mentoring, money, ideas, capital. People is coming up multiple times. It's one of the biggest challenge. Finance. Yeah, it's across the board. Ideas. Perseverance. Great. This is what our guests are putting in. Panel, you want to add something to this, something which you find the most common are the biggest words which are coming up: sustainability, team, money, control.
No, I think the centered around thing is the most important, which rightly people have said is people. You know, it's all people game. Startup is all about people. Not only about founders creating a team. A lot of time, you know, founders take all the responsibility and eventually they burn out by doing everything. So investors do look out what's the intent of the founders in hiring the right kind of mindset people. So people is the theme, I believe. And second, I believe personal experience, adaptation to technology. You know, we believe that it's very rapidly changing. Every time it is getting innovated. By the time you develop something, you see that, you know, this is becoming kind of, you need to innovate further on this. So probably that is something which I am not able to see it here.
Yeah.
But technology is something which I believe could be another important aspect.
I see a lot of vote going to funding and finance. Apart from that, team is also one big thing which is coming up. I suddenly remember what Sir Henry Ford said, that success takes care of itself when we take care of our team.
Wow.
When the team moves together, success automatically comes in.
So money follows people, people follow money. Sorry for these chicken.
People follow people.
People will follow money?
People will follow people.
People will follow people.
It'll always create. The one word that was kind of finding a lot of takers, it still finds a reasonable space there, is sustainability.
Yes.
We don't live on this earth alone. And for some odd reason, if there is one breed of doers who can make us believe this in the biggest ways possible, it's entrepreneurs and new businesses. That sustainability has a lot of connotation today. It just does not have energy connotations. It does not have co-living species connotation. We have to be a little more considerate on what we build. It cannot just be for the morrow. It should not just be for the value that we are creating. It has to be for the sustainable ideas. And a very small word that we kind of missed somewhere in the milieu of the cloud was vision. The new businesses that we have, the clearer the vision, the better the people, profitability, money, sustainability questions become. Because sometimes we are very muddled with it. We are doing it because somebody else in some part of the world did it very well. And as a country which takes in a lot of inspiration in the best of words that I can use for it, we do fall for a lot of Me Too ideas. And then that is something that needs to kind of change. We are on the verge of changing
So
that.
where the bus is going versus who all are on the bus.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we always talk
I
about
think
that.
that is exactly, to continue, I think the word idea which was there, I often see a lot of startups or people who talk to me about startups, they don't seem like good ideas to me because A, they are wannabes or more of the same. There are far too many players in that same space, you know, and none of them are particularly outstanding and this is somebody who's willing to try out every, you know, a new product. I'm willing to give it a go. Even if I don't want it, I'll give it a go to see whether it's a useful thing. One of the key ones which I have seen is this, the entire phalanx of medical linked, you know, that
Path.
I have not seen anyone take, because it's not only people like us. A medical startup will have to reach out to a retired couple living somewhere or poor people. They all want this product. But I have yet to see even a single product, and I'm already registered on about half a dozen of them, which seems to click. They don't seem to hit the sweet spot ever. And
there's almost a tunneling of this is the problem that you want to solve. You don't want to broaden the horizon of the problem taking, and then which is where it's an excellent point in saying we might have 500 med tech startups or med services startups or health tech startups who are essentially missing out on the basis of the fact that we were a country in strife in 2021. None of the startups could do a thing about it.
True.
So the idea is we're still missing the point by a huge margin. We are swinging our bats and the balls are swinging across.
True, very true.
So
We as startups also need to know where the money is. Like he says, Mr. Kamath says, I have the money, please focus on me. You're focusing on those 18-year-olds who are going to take permission to take
this country desperately needs.
Yeah.
But there's nobody doing
much work on that.
Which is where the POC question is so important, in the sense that if we have the right POCs, and who vets the POC makes your future journey of the proof of concept the right product or the right platform.
True. We put up one more question on challenges and scaling up, and I also invite Sangram Rautji, if he's there from Tata Steel, if you would like to add to the thought of scaling up. And if you really look at challenges in scaling up, one of the words which has come up big is competition and consistency.
Proper audience of finance people.
This is proper group wisdom which we are building up over here. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. So before going to that, I think I have one thing in my mind, maybe I can ask to the forum. So, in many startup, even it's a marriage between a storyline and number to come at a value. But as an investor, so we generally sit a bit skeptical, saying how the governance part is taken care. So whether I will put money in that company or not, because they have that thought process that sometimes they are not so matured and their mindset is not that. There may be some sort of hanky-panky happening inside. So how we can give assurance to the investors that the corporate governance part is taken care well, and there is a governance arbitrage happening inside. So you don't have to worry. So how the startup communities are now coming to give that comfort to the investors?
You are asking this as a startup or from...
As an investor.
As an investor.
Oh, as an investor.
Yeah.
Okay.
The entire startup world is actually a little worried about this Go mechanics matter. Who's who of the world have invested in them, and we know it's all ruckus going on around in the company. What's going on? So let me. This is absolutely, in my humble opinion, even if you put the bestest of the big fours or something there, you can always. There's no 100% guarantee that there would be a foolproof governance. There will always be issues around. But what are the fundamental points which you look at while investing? One, if there is a pedigree of a founder, a founder would have, a second time, third time founder. He would have exited certain ventures, either a failed venture or a exit venture through. So a pedigree of a founder becomes very, very important criteria to judge. Secondly, whenever an investor is putting in money, ideally is not an individual. He pools in via fund or probably a group of people coming in, putting in money. And what we generally advise, to our set of investors is to have kind of a, internal review monitoring, a board or something which keeps on giving periodic MIS. Again, cannot be 100% foolproof, but yes, to a certain extent, you put certain checks and balances, which probably would probably take a little bit of control. But that has a counterpoint. You can't put a lot of checks and balances because you are expecting a founder to be as fearless, and he can go wrong by adopting that strategy. So it's always a dichotomy. I mean, how do you handle this situation? So that situation will always remain, but I believe the pedigree of founder becomes very, very important in ascertaining the corporate governance aspect.
Yeah, the pedigree of people and the process both.
You see, I liked what Vineet. If you have shame, and if 31st night is something which is fearing you, so if a investor invests money in a startup, he looks at two things. He gives 50 marks to the concept, 50 to the person behind. आपने उस बंदे को ठीक से पढ़ लिया, फिर corporate governance वगैरह देखने की जरूरत नहीं है.
Just to add on it, you know that sustainability reporting that has now become mandated by SEBI for the listed companies. So I think something like social audit exchange is coming. So all this governance aspect is coming in small area. So I think hopefully maybe very quickly the way first it is moving towards this thing. So something will come for this startup also from this governance perspective. So ESG is very moving up concept. So
no, I think because I keep talking to startups, and Go Mechanic is a great example. Then there are at least 10 examples in last 1 year. I think what I see is the culture at the top, and the fear and the openness to break the negative news to the investors. See, and this happens mostly with first generation entrepreneurs because they have not seen failures. यार एक क्वार्टर बुरा जा सकता है, and numbers can fall. COVID is there, things can become bad. Now, the constant pressure that every month the line will go up, you will have more users, you will have more revenue. I think that pressure to continue to say good things about your startup to your investors, to PR, to media is something which is creating this problem, right? So I think the maturity has to come in from the board, from the investors also, large investors sitting on the board in terms of, see, it's a long story. It's a long journey you have to travel. So I think the culture at the top is very, very critical in terms of how you take failures, because as a startup you will fail, right? So I think that is very, very important. And this is and what Samir said, that's why startups or founders who have done or who are in the second or third startup, they become very, very important because they have seen this. 22 साल का लड़का, first generational entrepreneur, out of college, he just loves the chaos and the good news. Every day there is a good news about him in the PR, and there cannot be anything which is sad or bad in business. I think that thought process needs to change. If you do that, an investor have a very, very big role in this, and the board and the independent directors sitting there, advisors sitting there. No amount of MIS, because data can be fudged. I mean, if MIS would have been working, Go Mechanic would have done well. So it's about the culture. It's about don't fudge it, yeah. If it's not there, it's not there.
Yes, over to you. Does that work? Yeah.
30 seconds on this. Sir, it was very clearly pointed out. It's the person at the top. It was reiterated by the culture on the top. I'd like to make it a little more inevitable. These are inevitable pieces that we construe that are inevitable. Founders are not inevitable to a great idea. And it will find its time, it will find its execution, it will find its place, irrespective of the founder. The one thing that, sir, you should be chasing as an investor, and we have done about 31 portfolio investments in the last 18 months. The one thing that we sought out for was consistency. There was a word there in the cloud that we saw. The consistency could be about ebbs and flows also. It could be about the sine wave in the business also. It's not just about the J curve that we are chasing. So the idea is, if the format of what you are bringing to the table has enough amount of consistent requirement in the market, there would be a way that an active investor, an active stakeholder will always find clear-cut walkthroughs. And none of these so-called stories on scams and diligence have been pulled out by 22 to 26-year-old people. There have been people who were there in the industry for 15 years. There were people who were there founding their third companies also. So let's not connect this to age at all. I have seen the most responsible set of founders coming at a certain age. In fact, they are coming younger nowadays because of the simple reason that they understand that there is sustainability as a word, there is consistency as a word, and most importantly, there's return to stakeholders as a word. So no age defines that, and then it's just the...
No, so just want to have a counterpoint. When
Yeah.
I say age, when I'm doing my third business, I know the consequences of continue to pump up something which might go down badly, right? As a first business, when you're doing the first business just out of the college, you don't know till what point you have to fudge, right? Let me very, very candid.
True.
Right? You can say, so I was reading a report which said that, okay, fine, let's say you made 10 million, let's say we just first 10%. We say we made 11 million. And then it goes to 13 million, it goes to 18 million. After a year, after 6 months, the reality is 50%, the difference, right? And now they don't know what to do. So the experience of someone who has built second, third, fourth, who has seen due diligence by big fours, who has seen the kind of questions they need to answer when they are raising Series A, Series B or exit, that kind of makes them sane that no, we can't cross this line, right?
I've seen the other way around. They know where to not answer and just be safe from the situation. So they know the loopholes even better.
Sure. Any comments which you'd like to add, ma'am? I would also like to invite...
I'll just say what Ranjan was saying when he said that if you know the person behind the show. So what I think he meant was that if he knows the strength of the person to come out with the truth, then only that's what makes the difference. When you know how your business is doing and when you're ready to throw it to the board, yes, this is the situation, you can never go wrong.
True. Taking up the pressure
Just
and not...
one thing, there's also a very, very big movement towards community-driven startups nowadays. A lot of these founders are coming together to safeguard against age, against decision, against... These young innovations will come to you with a lot of these communities, adding literature, adding a lot of awareness, because we still remain a very young ecosystem. We are at best a 14-year-old ecosystem. So we have just got into our teens. Allow us the time to fail.
True. Shri Shyam Somani ji, Shri Vikash Rungta ji, if is there, would like to add, suggest, say, comment, guess.
As we see that for startup we are expecting extraordinary returns. So with extraordinary return we must expect extraordinary risk also. One point I would like to add to the various discussions had happened. Number two, that failure is part and parcel of the life. We cannot say that only fresher fails, even experienced people fails. In the history, corporate history of the world across the globe, we have found that many companies have failed because they are not ready to adapt. If you are ready to adapt for any changes, I think failure is far from, and success is very nearby.
True. Thank you. Any parting comments before I let the panel go from the stage and we take the discussion further? From any one of you as well, and even from the guests. I know it just went too much into the startup journey rather than just being into the business part of it, but that's something what the law of attraction says. If you get attracted towards something, you start talking about it, thinking about it a bit more.
I believe it's India's world now. Be fearless, be as aggressive as possible. Nothing stops India now becoming the next China. I think China, we don't really think it's a further story or not. But there's a lot of trust and belief in Indians globally. We have a lot of international advisors, consultants who keep speaking to us about India, and the kind of respect which we feel now we get. Everyone is looking in India either to set up a base or to do business in India. So be as fearless, do growth. यार निकल जाएंगे यार, दौड़ पड़ेगी इंडिया. Be ethical.
You know, on the scaling up thing, because the last question which came up was on scaling up, and we didn't discuss too much on that. You know, what I personally feel is there are a lot of finance people here, right? So we understand the concept of leverage, and we need to understand it deeply if we want to scale anything up in our life. So whether it's a business, startup, whatever we are thinking of. The problem happens when, you know, there was an initial remark that a startup, you know, when you do everything, it's a startup. So at a personal level, when you are starting a company, aap jhadu bhi maar rahe ho, aap ye kar rahe ho, that's okay. But when you grow, you need to understand that you cannot do everything. Because if you do everything, you cannot leverage your strength and scale up properly. Obviously, you have limited focus, you have limited bandwidth, right? So being focused and then leveraging your strengths is extremely, extremely important, and that comes with your continuous learning. I'm just reiterating the fact, because that's something which is undermined. We do our daily stuff and we miss out on learning new things, right? So 3 or 4 things which we need to focus on to leverage this power, right? One came out clearly is people. You need to leverage the power of the people. You know, what I have seen in Calcutta especially, you know, whatever limited experience I have, there are a lot of people who shy away from hiring the right kind of people because you have to pay extra, right? But that extra is very minimal compared to the leverage a good guy can bring into your organization. People feel that there is only a marginal difference between someone who is good and someone who is average and someone who is very good. It's not like that. There is exponential difference between people. You know, this skill set, it is not visible, but the skill sets, you know, this sets you apart by miles. And if you have the right set of people, the leverage of people comes to you, right? Technology, he was mentioning, obviously, technology is a very crucial part when scaling up. That's a big leverage, right? You cannot miss on people, you cannot miss on this. And then I personally feel reputation, which is ethics, which is, you know, we have been, if you go wrong there, there's a big problem. Everything will become zero ultimately. And if you go right there, it adds a big leveraging factor to you, because the investors will start believing you when you are scaling up for your next round because you did what you said, right? And everyone else, your employees will work harder because they know that they are working with the right kind of person. So this reputation, ethics, etc., again, invisible factor, but extremely crucial for the light leverage.
Wow. He summed it up, did my work. I'll just add one line is, instead of fudging, pivot fast and take things ahead. Before we invite the next panel on the stage, I believe there will be some other things to come up. I invite the others. Would we do a group photograph here or? Yes, so please join us, Vikash, and please come over and take over from me. It's sufficient. Please, let's have a photograph.